Imagine this, you're born into a world where your very first act is betrayal.
I'm barely a few hours old and already I've got a mission. My foster siblings? Yeah, they've got to go. It's not personal, it's just business. The nest can only support one chick, and that chick is me. Let's rewind to the beginning. My mother, the ultimate opportunist, laid me in someone else's nest, probably a warbler's, maybe a reed bunting's. She scouted the perfect location, made sure the coast was clear, and left me there like a sneaky little Easter egg. While I was still just a speck inside a shell, my fate was already sealed, survival at any cost. The moment I hatched, I knew what had to be done. My instincts kicked in and I started shoving those other eggs out of the nest. It's not like I had a choice. Resources are limited and competition is fierce. So out they went, one by one. By the time my foster parents returned, I was the sole survivor, wide-mouthed and ready to be fed. They didn't even notice their own eggs were missing. Talk about gullible. From then on, life was a buffet. My foster parents worked tirelessly to keep me fed, bringing me insects, worms, and whatever else they could find. I'm not going to lie, I demanded a lot. I was bigger, louder, and needier than their actual offspring would have been. But hey, that's the price of raising greatness. As I grew, so did my appetite. My foster parents were practically running themselves ragged trying to keep up. I'd perch in the nest, chirping incessantly, my mouth wide open like some insatiable black hole. And they delivered, time and time again. It's almost endearing how devoted they were to a chick that wasn't even theirs. Almost. By the time I fledged, I was ready to take on the world. Flying for the first time was, let's call it an adventure. I flapped, wobbled, and maybe crash-landed a few times, but I got the hang of it eventually. That's when the real fun began. No longer confined to the nest, I could explore, find my own food, and figure out what kind of cuckoo I wanted to be. Spoiler? I wanted to be the kind that thrives. Of course, the challenges didn't end there. Predators were everywhere, and other birds weren't exactly welcoming. Apparently, word gets around about my species' less than stellar reputation, but I'm nothing if not resourceful. I learned to stay out of sight, blend in, and avoid trouble whenever possible. Survival wasn't just about brute force, it was about brains. And so my life unfolded. From a tiny, ruthless hatchling to a sleek, cunning adult, I made my way in the world. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's still plenty of story left to tell, from my first solo flight to the trials of adulthood. For now, let's just say that being a cuckoo bird is anything but ordinary. Part 2. Adulthood as a cuckoo bird. Oh, it's a mixed bag of freedom, cunning, and, let's be honest, some pretty questionable life choices. After mastering the basics of flight and self-preservation, the time had come for me to embrace my destiny, perpetuating the great cuckoo legacy. Now I know what you're thinking. Surely you've matured into a more considerate bird by now? Spoiler alert, nope. If anything, adulthood is when I truly leaned into my nature. My primary goal, find a nest, repeat the cycle, and ensure my genes live on. But let's not oversimplify, this isn't some careless fling. It's a finely tuned operation. First, I had to scope out my targets. Not just any nest would do, it had to belong to a species that wouldn't immediately kick me to the curb. Reed warblers, dunnocks, meadow pipits, those poor souls never saw me coming. I'd lurk nearby, watching and waiting for the perfect moment. It's a bit like being a spy, minus the tuxedo and fancy gadgets. When the timing was just right, usually when the hosts were off foraging, I'd make my move. Quick as a flash, I'd lay my egg and skedaddle before anyone noticed. The precision required for this maneuver is nothing short of impressive. You try sneaking into someone's house, leaving a suspiciously large egg and disappearing without a trace. It's not as easy as it sounds. Then came the waiting game. I'd perch somewhere nearby, keeping an eye on the nest to make sure my gift wasn't rejected.
Most of the time, my host parents were none the wiser. They'd sit on my egg, warm it, and eventually raise my chick as if it were their own. It's almost touching, really, like a very twisted version of adoption. But let's not romanticize it too much. My chicks didn't exactly make things easy for their foster families. Remember how I said I was demanding as a baby? Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. My offspring were just as loud, needy, and unapologetically dominant as I had been. They'd grow bigger and stronger than their foster siblings, often at their expense. It's not pretty, but it's effective. And me? Once my egg was laid, I'd move on to the next nest, the next mission. It wasn't about abandoning my offspring, it was about ensuring that as many of my chicks as possible had a fighting chance. Call it tough love, call it strategic detachment. Either way, it worked. My legacy was secure, one commandeered nest at a time. Of course, adulthood wasn't all work and no play. I'd spend my downtime exploring, feeding, and occasionally dodging predators. Hawks and owls were a constant threat, but by now I'd mastered the art of evasion. My keen eyesight and swift flight kept me out of harm's way more often than not. But let's not get too sentimental. Aging didn't mean I suddenly developed a moral compass or started attending bird therapy sessions. No, I stayed true to my nature until the very end. Even in my later years, I managed to pull off a few more successful nesting capers. Sure, the effort left me more winded than it used to, but the satisfaction? Oh, that was timeless. The changing seasons became a bittersweet reminder of my mortality. As the trees shed their leaves and the air grew colder, I found myself reflecting on the life I'd led. Not many birds could say they'd perfected the art of survival quite like I had. My tactics may not have won me any popularity contests, but they ensured my lineage would endure. And isn't that the ultimate goal? As my final days approached, I sought out a quiet place to rest, a secluded branch, far from prying eyes and noisy flocks. I'd seen enough of the world to know that it would carry on just fine without me. My chicks, my legacy, were out there, perpetuating the cycle I'd set in motion. And so, I took one last look at the sky, the endless expanse that had been both my playground and my battleground. With a contented sigh, or as close to one as a bird can manage, I closed my eyes and let the world fade away. Life as a cuckoo bird had been anything but ordinary, and I wouldn't have had it any other way.